like music too.
Exactly. Good lighting up here. Well, the commissioner and I just said backstage, what are we going to talk about? I said the first thing we want to do is compliment the organizers of this event. It is really impressive. I arrived yesterday just before lunch. Good timing on my part. Nice lunch, and started off with presentations by, I remember one 13-year-old farmer. I was impressed. I remember when I was a 13-year-old farmer, and he really had a good operation going. So congratulations to the organizers on what I really think is a great event and exactly the thing that New York needs to be doing right now.
Well, thank you, Professor, and thank you, Jen, for the introduction. It's great to be here, and I'm just calculating in my head the mental horsepower that's participating today, and pretty excited about that.
Yeah, so I guess I'm here to talk about the global part. Huh?
Okay.
So, we think about the global food system and try to think about how New York fits into it. The global food system is in a pretty challenging situation right now. A majority of the food, especially the food grains. By the way, I'm a plant breeder, a rice breeder, a wheat breeder. I was a student of Norman Borlaug, who the commissioner has a great admiration for him, the only Nobel Prize winner in agriculture. Anyway, the situation with the global food system is we're producing most of the feed grains and food grain on this side of the world and shipping it to the other side of the world, which is, just really not a sustainable situation. I've been moving around the world for just about 50 years now, and if there's any big lesson to learn about your food system is you need to keep as much of it local as possible. And the commissioner here has his own personal experience at operating a local supply chain in the vegetable arena. I think he has a lot of insight on the challenges of doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I met Ronnie some years ago and instantly liked him because he actually got to work with one of my heroes, Norman Borlaug. And I think if you don't know who Norman Borlaug was, you should Google him and look him up because he was a pretty impressive individual. I've had my picture taken with his statue. That's as close.
In Washington.
But just thinking a little bit about the global piece and the rural nature of success that we need to achieve here in New York State. I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to host the Tri-National Accord, which is a conversation between the 50 commissioners of ag in the U.S. and the ministers of ag from Canada and the secretaries of ag from Mexico. And it brought me back to the global scene there just a little bit. And 30 years ago when NAFTA first passed, it was a trade pact. A lot of controversy, a lot of different opinions about NAFTA. But Norman had worked in Mexico to do the breeding that led to the Nobel Peace Prize. But 30 years ago when Mexico signed that agreement, part of their impetus for doing that was 50% of the Mexican population lived in poverty. 30 years later, Mexico, and this was the 30th Tri-National Accord that we held, Mexico is a real powerhouse in agriculture. They're a worldwide player. They're our biggest dairy export customer. A lot of trade happening back and forth. But today, 30 years after entering into that agreement, 50% of Mexico's population still lives in poverty. So I think the challenge that we face here as we look at global and local climate and everything else is how does success in agriculture, the success of the people in this room, translate into success in our rural communities? That needs to be a focus on where we go. This past year and a half going through COVID-19, I think has, for us in New York, taught us some big lessons. And although we have to be global partners, I think New York State has come to realize, I hope, and we need to keep this alive, that we need a food supply chain that's responsive, that's resilient, if we face a situation like this. And we need to less rely on another part of the world for the things that we need here in New York State if we're going to be successful. So that's an observation that I think we got to keep alive as we think about what we're doing.
Well, you mentioned Mexico. I was trained down there, as you know. I spent a year and a half working with Borlaug. One of the big challenges in the global system is subsidies. You know, you think about New York. We're really nicely positioned here. We've got good water, good power, green power, wind, solar, hydro. We have a lot of advantages, but you know, the subsidies bring some peculiar competitions. You get water subsidy in the West and a transportation subsidy, and all of a sudden you've got competition coming all the way from the other side of the country for things that could be produced here. Mexico is another example of us, you know, producing corn, maize, and shipping it to Mexico at an unbelievably low price, and so Mexican farmers really can't compete with that. That especially if you're a small farmer in Mexico, there's no way you can produce maize, compete with the U.S. maize. So these are some challenges that we face, and I think you know, it's going to be hard to evolve out of that system, Commissioner, but there's some technology changes coming that may force our hand. You know, presently a lot of this feed grain is going to produce animal protein, majority of it, as a matter of fact. But we're looking at the real likelihood that, you know, we'll have alternate means of producing animal proteins. It's already happening in some parts of the world, like Singapore. They're producing, you know, chicken nuggets without any chicken, and milk in a stainless steel vat without a cow. So these are the kinds of technology changes that are coming down the road that are probably going to force the food system to make some changes.
Yeah, it'll be a fasten your seatbelt kind of thing for sure. But I have a map of New York State in my office, and I tell visitors, I said, that's my world map right now. You're so right. New York State, we're in a pretty good place. Of course, I'm a farmer, so I'm eternally optimistic about things. But I look at New York State, and I see we have access to water.
Exactly.
We have good land here. We have some of the best farmers in the country here. We rank in the top 10 of over 30 commodities nationally. And when I meet with the other commissioners, we figure in every conversation about agriculture because we're relevant in New York State. We have arguably the best land grant system for ag education in the country, arguably the world perhaps. And we get to live and work and farm and produce these crops and produce these value-added opportunities within a few miles of the biggest, most marvelous marketplace anywhere in the world. So I think long-term, we need to look back a little bit, recognize some of the challenges that COVID-19 taught us, and realize we have a real opportunity to connect the dots right here. That marketplace doesn't completely know New York State agriculture, but we have an opportunity to tell them about this. And I think this is a great forum for doing just that as well. So,
absolutely. You know, you think about New York, it's the perfect place for green power. You know, you've got the wind, you've got the solar, you've got the hydro that lets you most places that are investing in wind and solar, they don't have a means to control the grid. But here you have the hydro, which you can use to balance the grid. And you can, if you've got extra solar or wind power, you can pump water uphill. I mean, you know, you can pump it up to the Adirondacks, you can pump it up to Niagara Escarpment out west. It's the perfect place for the future for green power, which is going to be, I think, the secret of of competition.
Exactly. And we've got probably in New York State the most aggressive goals regarding climate change. We're seeing, I've seen on my farm 3 different 100-year events and 1 500-year event happen in my valley. We know climate is affecting us today, and we've got an aggressive plan here in New York. I think we have an opportunity to make sure that rural New York is a participant here. We're at the table. Agriculture is in a unique position in that we can just not lessen our impact on the climate, but we can actually do things like sequester carbon, and we can farm
Absolutely.
in a good way. We can actually be part of the solution. I look at the burden that falls on transportation, that falls on energy generation, that falls on waste, that falls on housing, and I say, in agriculture, we have some answers. We need some technology. We're going to have to rely on some technology that maybe is going to show up here today, but technology that it hasn't been thought of yet or is still in a developing process to get us there. But we can get there here in New York.
Pretty clearly, these are the people that are bringing it, and that's what's needed. In fact, Thomas Friedman had a piece in the paper this morning. It's going to take some serious technology to get us through these challenges, and we've seen just coming through the COVID thing. I mean, it's to me as a scientist, it's absolutely amazing that we were able to respond in the space of 1 year to the challenge of COVID and vaccinate most of our population. It's really speaks to what science can do. Looks like we're getting down to question time.
Just as a reminder before our first question, our in-person audience can submit questions through the attendee hub on your mobile phone or laptop right from your seats here at the On Center. So our first question is, with Ronnie as a plant breeder and Commissioner Ball as a farmer, what are your thoughts on how plant scientists can help farmers through innovation as we look to increasing challenges from climate change?
Well, I guess that's the perfect question for a plant breeder. I've always been a great advocate of plant breeding, and I think the future's bright for anyone who's interested in the field. I mean, the big change in plant breeding since I got into it is the extraordinary power of computing and what it allows us to do with the genomes. In fact, that's what's bringing on this alternate protein production. You can easily modify a microorganism to produce any protein you're interested in, be it casein or whey or whatever. So the same thing is true for plants. We have extraordinarily powerful tools, and they're, you might say doubling in power every 18 months with the doubling in computer power. So the future's bright for plant breeding and for the modification of organisms generally to produce proteins that are beneficial for society.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I think back as you were speaking about when I was milking cows with my grandfather when I was 7. And I think about the way he was farming and the yields he was getting and the amount of effort. We used to joke that sometimes making a living took all day. Boy, at that time it took all day. Yeah. And today, if he could see some of the things that we're doing on our farms with the technology and the breeding that we've been able to bring to bear, the yields we get and the efficiencies we have. But I also think about our understanding through science of the challenges. Climate's bringing us some additional diseases and some additional pests to our latitude that we didn't have before. And I think back about growing potatoes when I was 20 years old, and I think about how we manage those pests today. We have learned so much scientifically about how to take good breeding, good seed stock, and then add better science and better understanding of the environment. There's things that he worried about, there's things that I worried about before that I don't worry about too much anymore.
Yeah.
Our next question is, Commissioner, how is New York State thinking about investing in the necessary infrastructure to support a more regional food system?
Boy, that's a $64,000 question right there. You know, I think that going through COVID-19 and that bright light that shone on the entire food system showed some weaknesses. We saw both ends of that chain really get devastated. The farmer who lost 50% of his marketplace, which traditionally went to the food service world, institutions and schools, et cetera, restaurants, to the other end, the consumer who had a hard time finding product in the store. We were fortunate here in New York to have a great relationship with our Hunger and Food Policy Council, with the food bank system, the emergency fooding system, pantries, et cetera, and farmers, and our researchers, and the state agencies that are relevant. So I think that's our task right now. We're spent the last year looking at what happened, how we perform better, how we make sure we have alternative routes, and what does that emergency food system need for us to be resilient. We have to have a resilient and responsive food system here in this state. So I think the will is there, the interest is there. This is something that the legislature, the governor, and certainly the department is very passionate about. Where there's a will, there will be a way, and that's how we'll get there.
Do we have time for one more?
Up to you.
Okay, we'll go with one more. What are some ways that tech startups can support the objectives of nutrition programs like Farm to School?
That's a fantastic question. You know, farmers today have to be keeping up with the latest technology, plant breeding, and if we're going to be able to deliver on those promises. The Farm to School, that's a term that's been around for many years. It's finally getting some traction for our young people in the state who we're going to need to fill those technical roles, to work in today's modern dairy plants, food processing plants, work on tomorrow's farms. They're going to have that education, and they're going to need a lot of touch points from kindergarten through high school. You know, we're going to do a great job when we get them to Cornell and our land-grant schools, but we need the touch points to have them have an interest in agriculture and delivering that food to those schools. So I'm very passionate about this next workforce and how we reach out to them and identify those career paths that are going to bring them into the food system. We're fond of pointing out that only 1% of people in the U.S. today are actively farming and feeding the other 99%. But we don't think about the rest of the food system always, and we need to. Blockchain technology, research, breeding, food cooking, food distribution, all the other realm of food system subjects amount to more than 40% of the jobs in the U.S. So we need to start preparing our young people for that.
I think it's been featured because of the emphasis you placed on it in your office, sir, and you know, it's something we should all really appreciate. I think we'll see more examples today, I think, of how the young people here are really the answer to the future. So it's a pleasure to be a part of it.
Awesome. They are our future. Thank you.